Hi, everybody. Well, this is going to be interesting. I hope everybody is doing okay. Uh, I've had a few questions. This one from Mary Louise Maugion in Spain still. And she asked me to discuss the emotional mind in relationship to how it creates suffering. In fact, the emotional mind doesn't really create the suffering, but it's involved with a whole link up between energies coming in to the physical system. And remember, you're related to the physical center, right? Your bodies are the center of your universe. Even though it appears to be that you're mentally engaging with the universe, emotionally engaging with the universe. And really, what begins to occur there is that you have a response system. Excuse me, Marlene. A response system, and basically a sensory system. So it brings in information from the surroundings and your environment and allows you to bring the information up into the mental structure. But your emotional sensing system is very, very valuable, both with receiving information and giving you responses with respect to information. You may have no information coming into you from your perspective consciously, but suddenly you realize that you are reacting inside yourself. So, in fact, you react mentally from the assessment of your emotional disposition. How fast that can occur, well, I think you can understand how quickly that can happen. It's almost without any thought whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, it originally probably had no thought whatsoever, but perhaps just a little bit of reflexive thinking that allows one to react and engage to support and defend their existence. The emotional mind, of course, at this stage in the game has been stimulated by universities, by reading, by listening, by trying to think a bit. In other words, try to lay one piece of information on top of another, see how it fits, engage literally with the center of your belief system. In other words, the thing you already have decided makes sense to you. And it appears that when we say makes sense to you, that relates to mind. But that emotional sensing and that mental assertion that allows you to relate to something based on a belief system is really a coordination system. You're trying to coordinate the information that you perceive in a manner that relates to what you believe you already understand and know through experience, through all of your reflexive training, both known and unknown in your life. I'm afraid that is still the key element in our relationship with existence. Even when we are attempting to perceive something and make sense of something, we lay groundwork. How has this been before? Should I be responding in some way that allows me to reconsider that? Well, we're talking to ourselves there, and that's kind of a mental system, early stages. And at the same time, we're saying, well, is it possible that these things may be valuable, may be true even? And your emotional mind is enabling you to come up with an answer that relates to yes, no, or I really don't know. Then there may be an alternate possibility unknown to me at this particular stage. That would be a little bit in the mental side of things, whereas the reflexive part is on the emotional side of things. The emotional mind is very complicated. It's involved with your own personalized will, how you identify yourself in the world. It's involved with where you normally have been trained to defend uh, the way you believe things have to be, or even images that you believe are extremely important to you for you to be confident, responsive, of value, mm, or not of value, non responsive, whatever it may mean. What that really means is you're constantly engaged with a whole complex of reflexes and considerations that you already believe must be vital in the way you function with others and yourself. This is mainly based on emotional mind and emotional responses and habits that are very much tested in your day to day or very much protected in your day to day or very much agreed with in your day to day. None of these kinds of things are negative in any way. They're constructive systems. You attempt to engage, respond, reconsider, or not reconsider based on how your hallowed ground is constructed. Your personality characteristics decide, or you decide your characteristics, the ones you use, are really important to you. This is natural and normal. There's no negation in this. But when you're looking at, and I think Mary Lou was getting at this part as well, anything that is different than how you normally see the world puts stress on the system of beliefs that you hold unconsciously and consciously, of course, um, relating to the territory that you happen to be walking on in terms of that very particular moment or day. There's no devaluation in this, and also very little evaluation. However, you can interfere and evaluate based on your relationship with how you want to move. It's a movement towards the future. Going slowly allows you to reconsider without negating. Going quickly helps you to defend your relationship with how you're functioning. And no negation really in that place is there except your reactive responses. When you have a reactive response, it's normally because of an internal or external fear relating to the territory that you've already traveled. This is natural and it's normal. But we're not used to being told that this is natural and normal. We're used to the idea that if you have a response like that, something else is wrong versus right. So, what I'd like to just say is learning how to be less judgmental about how you function and just realize that these responses in the system are there for the purpose of enabling you to try and help yourself to survive. Be okay with you the best you possibly can. Fear, especially in these times, is natural and normal and probably will continue for a little while and quite naturally should. You are a really normal human being if you notice your vulnerability, and you are okay as a person if you have it. Just continue on and do the best you possibly can. The next one I'd like to take a look at is, whoops, I think I put them out of order, not in order. So excuse me for that. Um, this one is from Chelsea in Maryland. And she had kind of different experience for her after some exercises that I presume she is trying. She noticed that she had an awareness behind her when she was driving her car that made her nervous, meaning it's as if it comes upon you that you should look behind you, that kind of thing, which means that would be quite natural for anyone who's used to being aware in front of them more often than behind them. This, of course, is just part of adjustments and changes that occur in a broadening of perceptions that are in a process towards broadening because ultimately awareness around you and in you becomes very, very important. Then you begin to try to understand those awarenesses from a different perspective than the perspective that you've already been using because we're frontal aware primarily as a species, each individual. It's rare that you check behind you automatically. It's more you check in front of you and, see how your countenance is, your characteristics, if your hair is okay, whatever. And what I would suggest is if you're in a car and you get a sudden kind of jerky response to check around you, slow yourself down best you can and do that as a reality check. I bit my tongue there. Because even though it's easy when you speak it, it's a little bit harder to slow yourself down when you have a reactive response. Reactive responses are very, very much trained in us all. And that would be normal to have a reactive response. Try to be aware around you if you're in the car. Check the mirrors, check behind you. Be careful of your blind sides. And then slowly, if you need to pull over into the lane that you're looking for. This sounds a little strange in a way for an experienced driver to suddenly need to check around them. It normally means that there might be something instinctively going on internally that you need to check for and you hadn't noticed. It's possible. Don't throw that out, but go slow, breathe in, soften you a little bit. And what I normally do is I try to pay attention the best I possibly can, but I also realize that my unconscious perceptions can be quite strong as well as my conscious ones. So trust them, but it may be just through the process of broadening your ability to perceive around you, you may run into a set of circumstances that is just practicing to be aware around you. It's like as if more energy comes in and helps you to pay attention a little bit more than you normally used to. This is of great value. Soften it down, breathe a bit, and say, oh, okay, I'm just trying to practice it, being aware a little bit more around me. But you're not used to it, so it doesn't shift into what you believe should be happening because it's a different thing. Be okay. It sounds like you're doing fine. I think that's, I would say, trying to soften down the reaction the best you can. Talk to yourself. Hey, easy does it. Easy does it. Use your name if you want. And you'll notice that you'll start to slow down a little bit. Same is true, by the way, when, for example, if you were walking down the street, Chelsea, and a person happened to look at you, and you would have a sensation about someone looking at you. It's a bit like that, except that there's no one there. So, softening down a bit, and you may have already experienced that looking at you business, and you reflexively turned to see if there was someone there, and there was. That's instinctive, and that is a part of our defensive or our survival system. It's profoundly complicated, our system, I mean, and becoming aware just a little bit more than what you're used to takes a little bit of getting used to. Take your time and be okay with you and just motor on or realize that the process may be beginning a little bit. Be okay. Talk to Della about it. She might be able to also reassure you that you're okay. Great. Now, here's another one. This is from Deborah from Tennessee, Nashville. And I'll just get, after the weekend, she was wondering about having tensions in the neck and the shoulders and very itchy ears. Well, it's really interesting that most of us, when we're engaging with life, automatically don't realize that we're using energy that comes through our lower system for the purpose of presenting an engagement with life the way we think life should be engaged with. This is natural and normal, and a very valuable thing to recognize as a reality. However, this is a theory for most people and not an experience. Most of our experienced people who have noticed the activity of the root center or the gonad center or the solar plexus begin to realize after a while that they have counterparts above the diaphragm. And there is a movement that can be helpful with the personalized will at a very soft level. We can focus on the root below the root area and draw our attention up to the top of our head. If energy is moving up the back more, it will pull on the energy that moves through the will center or the gonad center, and also pull on the emotional center to bring up energy up past the solar plexus, past and through the heart a bit at the lower part of it, past and through the throat center as well at the lower part of it, and then into the back of the head and up into the top of the head. This happens subtly, and of course, if you're redirecting only the root center, you will think that you're just bringing your attention from below your buttocks area all the way up to the top of your head. But it pulls on the lower system because the lower system is the stabilizing system in our world, in this personality world that we are all engaged with. As a stabilizing system, it has a manner of engagement with life. It attempts to remain virtually similar to what it was before. When you bring your attention upward, of course, you are shifting and changing what is occurring in the neck area, because that relates to the will structure of a being that is conscious. In doing that, of course, you can understand that another method may be useful too when you reach out about a foot in front of the gonad center area and draw your attention back behind your back and up and through the throat area out about a foot or so, slowly, softly, and back again, way back about a foot behind your neck, and a big curve up and over two sides of your head and down right into roughly the center of your forehead, roughly a little lower than the center of your forehead. Now, what that does automatically, whether you're doing it or not, when the energy of the throat center is functioning a little bit more than what you're used to, and often, by the way, the pump will help you with that because it pulls energy up from the bottom to the upper aspects of these structures, Zephyrov or chakras. And what is going on there, it turns on energy more in the neck, which comes up two different places, different for different people, or both for some, up through the sides of the face towards the temples, both sides, then across the brow, or it cuts around the ears and it can come up from the back and around the ears and towards the temple. There is a flow that comes out off the temples, both sides, roughly about 8 to 9 inches. It can be a little stronger than that, and it will drive your head and your ears crazy. You'll be scratching, 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 scratching your ears, and can't really figure out what's going on. Well, also, unknown or known to you, there will be a flow coming around from the back, around on both sides, right to the center of the forehead. Both sides around. It's like a Valentine, 14th of February Valentine, starting from the small part, both sides, bending, and coming into roughly this area. If you do not experience that, it can still occur because you're learning to be aware or conscious of the energy moving along the sides. But it is not uncommon for the physical body, which is part of the protective system, the brain and the nervous system. It's an energetic system, part of the system to protect the form and broaden awareness of the form eventually. And I think what's happening there is the throat center has been activated, and it's activated also at the back of your head, roughly about the edges of the head on both sides, and it's being stimulated and helping your brow to come on so that the emotional, mental system that I was just talking about a little while ago can also be looked at from inside as if you're on the inside of you looking to the outside of you. It increases that way because it's a part of opening an upper aspect of the will, which is involved with this cradle here, the upper cradle, one could say, at the back of the neck as well, rather than the lower cradle. Yet energy still moves through the lower cradle because it must, wear a physical form. But it turns on the upper cradle, and what may be going on is somewhat of a turn on in the upper part of the cradle, the upper cradle, I'm sorry. So that in doing that, you begin to function slightly differently. If you're listening, Deborah, you would notice a little bit of a movement in the chest when I'm talking about it. That slight movement is an indicator that the throat center has come on a little bit and is moving it out here, and you're feeling it closer to the body. Because the whole skin system is a tremendous single organism which can perceive off the body form and in the body form, or energy off the body, energy in the body. This is a natural, normal tendency, as um, you've heard me discuss before, because of the initial early development of the fetus in the womb. At some point, the brain and the nervous system becomes much more functional, and it stimulates the skin almost like a sensing hearing system, including the ears, of what activity is going on outside the uh, the mother's body and inside the mother in terms of response. This is very important to understand because ultimately, since it's been turned on already, it can be turned on again, but for a different purpose than the originating purpose. Except if you look at it like an environmental thing, the internal form unknowingly is responding, learning how to respond to those things that are external from the physical form, emotional voice responses, reaction responses, learning in the womb, and later, because it will have to know something once it comes out of the physical body, the mother's physical body. It will have to know reflexively mm, uh, a sense of what is going on in the environment around it. But also, you are learning to know what goes on in the environment that you're in a movement towards as the broadening of internal perceptions get stronger and stronger. You are moving towards perceiving those spiritual constructs, these chakras or zephyrat, and they mean something. But if the personality is the only thing that assesses this, in other words, using only the lower will's orientation, then it will be perceived from a lower way of perceiving, which means in accordance with what your experience is currently or what your personality would dissect. This movement into the throat area moves into a different structure, and it's a prelude to an allowance of perceiving by watching as if you were perceiving a whole different environment, same as in the womb, and you were preparing to move out of that environment into an understanding of another environment altogether. Of course, though, you will not forget how this environment is because your physical center, emotional, mental center, currently personality orientation, is focused here. But there's another constructed area within the mind that can allow you to observe and recognize and perceive as if you are separate from the individual who is the actual perceiver, which is your personality, Deborah. I would hope that that makes some sense, but as an individual proceeds through this process, the process of being okay with going beyond what you believe has to be true now, and only that, then there are some adjustments that begin to occur, not because you're adjusting anything, just because you're experiencing things that are different and you're seeing it from a different perspective. So the perspective is shifting and changing. But you also know that in a different environment, your perspective is also locked into a previous way of seeing things, but now that is broadening out somewhat. Okay, I am basically just trying to help whoever is listening to understand understand that this is a broadening process as opposed to this is right and that's wrong and this is better and that's worse and all the rest of that stuff, which, by the way, really helps us in our personality life, I suppose. And I know that that's true, to find a balance to keep that lower system structurally stable the best we can in spite of ourselves, because we are experiential and curious beings and we live life and are constantly wondering about this and that, whatever that may mean. But at the same time, allowing ourselves to shift a little out of what needs to be assessed immediately. It's as if we're saying, stop a minute, don't come up with an answer to everything. See how things are inside, outside. If it doesn't make any sense to you, it may come back again and see if it makes sense to you then. Because your system is not this versus that, another state versus the emotional state versus the physical state versus a multiplicity of states. It's a conglomerate of states. And each state is referenced by our personality. Yes, I agree. But also, each state begins to show a link to another state through watching and recognizing and trying to make sense of something beyond what you have to make sense of to be validated by the personality's older adventures. The older adventures are very important, but they can't make sense of some things that the experiential form comes up with as it broadens. Experiential form is you living life. So try to live life, be happy, continue day to day best you can. I hope that covered it a little bit. Yeah, I think it's easy to come up with answers. I think I must have slept on my shoulder last night. I think I must have done this. I think I must have done that. This is what we normally do. That's what I'm talking about. To see things differently may broaden how we first dissect an occurrence. I would offer a possibility. The balancing you mentioned is a good idea. But I would also offer the pump. It's a very old thing. It's done in a lot of different ways all over the world. In the Hebrew system, it's done from the solar plexus down, and it drives energy up the back or up the front, depending on the individual's process and how it's already started. If you use attention to the lowest part of the neck, near the dowager's hump, and just move the neck like this, very softly, let it come down a bit, and then slowly paying attention only to the lowest part of the neck. Soften and do it again that way. You will notice almost automatically reactions in the solar plexus, the root center, perhaps the gonad center, depending on the individual. And there will be a movement of energy up the front and down the back, up the back and down the front, or all the way straight up through the body. The Chinese, the Taoist orientation, have a very similar way of doing things. They believe, and I'm inclined to agree through my experience, at least what little it is, that energy can come up the back and down the front. Very, very much if you're aware around your body. It can also come up the front and down the back. It can happen either one or the other, or both at the same time. It can come up from the perineum all the way through to the top of your head at the fontanelle, all the way through and up. Keep going straight up about 3 feet, another 6 feet, up to about 9 to 12 feet. Same thing can happen below your feet. That's not something that is new. That's something that's been there for a long period of time. I believe the Hebrew orientation is the same way with the Sephirot. But the same is true for the Chinese orientation, and the same is true for the Indian and Buddhist orientation, yet they don't talk about it very much because they have this concept, and I think logistically perhaps pretty correct, mostly, not always, that if someone knows how things are, they can talk like they have it happen to them, and therefore not be helpful. This is a very old idea and a very wise one. So when you're dealing with these things, don't talk about what you know. Learn how to engage and be it. And that's what you're learning. And that's what everyone is attempting to learn wherever they are over time. There's an elongation process that goes on when an individual focuses and on this word only being validated with what they know or what they believe. The trip is shorter, but much more experiential if you're attempting to perceive internally and slowly attempt to understand your relationship as a human being with the broadening that goes into a realm or state, more spiritual state. You can still mess up if you're in a spiritual state. You can still be spiritual. You can still engage as a human being. But being honest to yourself inside is much more appropriate than projecting a self that is very much part of a projection. It's normal for us to do that last part. It is not negative, it's just normal. Becoming able to perceive that as normal, but not necessarily agreeing with it, is helpful because you are the one who is growing and you're growing through you. I wish everybody well with that one because it's one of the key things that will inspire you and give you courage and a willingness to go beyond wherever you are without being overly impatient. Impatience will occur. But overly impatient means that you will jump here and there to engage with things that may or may not be helpful experientially, but they will be helpful in terms of information. Perhaps even those people who do that can learn that experience is the place that relates to real internal growth. And I would wish that that level of experience would happen to everybody. The biggest dilemma is if you're a teacher, you try to be as straight as you can about your relationship with that growing and your perceptions, and you try to keep your personality in check the best you possibly can. So I want to just mention, I have other questions, but I just want to mention that I hope everybody is trying to be as safe as they can and washing their hands and trying to make a distance between you and your neighbors. Sure messes up dancing, but I wish everyone a really very, very important growing process and extremely safe one. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon. Next Thursday, I hope. Bye for now.